Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the People on the Go Lunch and Learn webinar. My name is Melissa Sweat. I'm Customer Relationship and Community Manager at People on the Go, and I'll be moderating our webinar today. Before we get started, let's just do a quick check to make sure that you can hear me just fine and see the screen. Please locate the questions panel and go to webinar and just type in a brief note, a hi, hello, and okay, and all systems go, just to let me know that everything is fine on the technology side. Awesome, thank you so much, everyone, much appreciated. And by the way, if you are needing assistance, the number to call is right there on the screen, 1-800-263-6317, and I will also be on to help you as well. You are here for Emotional Resilience in Action, How to Succeed in High-Risk Conversations. And I'll be introducing Lela, our presenter, in just a moment. But just a quick background about why we have these sessions, especially for those who might be with us for the first time. We have these sessions because our focus at People on the Go is productivity and leadership in the workplace. And the topics that you see on the screen are some of the topics that we cover. And with that, I'll introduce Lela. Lela Djakovic is the founder and CEO of EQED, a Silicon Valley advisory firm that focuses on designing high-performing teams and enhancing business performance by leveraging emotional intelligence, EQ, and resilience skills. She is always searching for the fastest and most effective ways to build EQ and bring about lasting behavioral changes. Lela facilitates the popular elective interpersonal dynamics, aka touchy-feely, at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. She co-founded 3 other ventures in finance, software, and cosmetics. Previously, she worked in leveraged finance and was a credit and commodity derivatives trader at Goldman Sachs in London. She holds an MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business and a Bachelor of Science Honors in Mathematics from the University of Durham, England. And now, before we start, our founder at People on the Go, Pierre Kawan, would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Melissa, and hello, everyone, and hello, Lela. I would like to add a few words to Melissa's introduction. I attended Leila's workshop on emotional intelligence recently, and I witnessed an audience that experienced some amazing aha moments. And these were business professionals from all walks of life, from executives to entrepreneurs, managers, individual contributors. So this was quite impressive and very refreshing to see. And I really wanted our People on the Go community to have a taste of this. So I invited Lela to be with us and to share with us her insights. And I'm very excited that she's with us today and about to share these valuable insights. So thank you, Lela. And here we go. Here we are.
Thank you so much, Pierre, and thank you again, Lela. I'm going to go ahead and transfer over to Lela now, and this transition will take just a moment.
Hey, I think we are on. Can you hear me, Melissa? Can you just confirm that my audio is working?
Yes, Lela, audio and visual looks great.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Pierre. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, People on the Go, and welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. I am very excited about our time together on this webinar on emotional resilience in action, how to succeed in high-risk conversations. It's a very important topic and very dear to my heart, because so often when we are in these conversations, it's because we're either speaking to somebody who really matters to us, or we're speaking about a topic that really matters to us, or there's an outcome to this conversation that we wish for that is really important to us. And yet often in those kind of conversations, because it matters so much, they can sometimes not quite go the way we want to. So today, really, it's about strengthening our skills to do well in those conversations, because they are so important in our lives, both in our careers as well as in our private lives. The session today that we have today, the goals are really that you walk away with some big ahas, and also some real skills, something that you can straight away go out and apply in your next conversation that is a little bit more on the high risk side. And it's going to be a very experiential day today. So I will give a little bit of background information, but the purpose is less about giving information and more about us actually practicing some of those skills so that you walk away with something concrete. And without further ado with that, let's go straight into it. So what I was saying about high-risk conversations, they are often, I know we've all been in those, is that we're talking to somebody who's important or about a subject that's important. Sometimes we actually plan to have those conversations. We actually walk in and we are all, fired up and a little bit worried and nervous about them too. But most of the time, actually, high-risk conversations happen when we least expect them. We are just in a normal conversation, and suddenly somebody says something, and we can just feel the tension rising, and suddenly we are in one of those important conversations that somehow feel risky. And what happens is that we often start experiencing some emotions, which are often more frustration, of fear, of anxiety, those kind of emotions, and our adrenaline starts pumping, and we often lose access to the best self that we would like to bring to such an important conversation. So we're going to be talking about all of that and actually develop some tools and techniques to be able to regulate ourselves a little bit more. So today, emotional resilience often is about, when you think about resilience, is the way it's defined, it's actually you kind of start in one state, something happens, you kind of get bent out of shape a little, and then you come back to that state, which is all very good. So an ability to basically bounce back, that's all very good. However, where I think the real possibility is actually not just bouncing back to the state that you started out from, but actually every time getting a little bit better, building new capacities, building new skills, getting access to some new behaviors, so that over time, you actually become more and more resilient. So that's the possibility. And also with high-risk conversations, so often we are nervous about them, but actually what we both know from experience as well as the research shows, when you actually look at where some of the strong relationships are built, it's often in conflict situations. It's often when actually, if you and I are in a conversation and we actually manage to navigate a difficult conversation well, it will actually increase our trust between us. And actually, there's a real bonding that happens. So actually, the possibility is not to just survive these and navigate them successfully, but actually to deepen relationship and actually have really great outcomes from that. So we're going to be working on that. So let's start where it all starts, which is really with our brains. So we don't just have one brain. We actually have two brains. And in this case, we at EQED call it the red brain, blue brain model. So the blue brain is basically the thinking brain. It's kind of your cognitive brain, the big brain that we all know about that make us uniquely human in so many ways. It's our thinking brain. It's where linear thinking is. It's where our computational abilities are. It's where language sits. It's where the concept of I is. It's an incredibly powerful machinery we have out there. It's very exact, it's powerful, but it can also be more on the slow side, actually. It's also the place where we have concepts, etc. So that's the blue brain. On the other side, we have the red brain, which is kind of more in the back of our heads, and the emotional brains. A lot of that are kind of more the animal brains that we have. And the purpose of the emotional brain is really to make sure that when something happens in the environment that's endangering us, that is putting us in danger, that we survive. So if there's a saber-toothed tiger that comes around the corner, then we need to basically put us into the state to either be able to fight and survive or flee and survive, depending on what the situation is. So it's a very fast brain. It happens often. A lot of the functionality is kind of unconscious, like even when we get triggered, like into that kind of danger state, we often don't even know what just happened, but we start experiencing some of those fear emotions. And it's very fast, powerful in its own way, but it's not very exact. We'll talk about that in a moment, why that matters. So it's the place of survival, it's the place of flight and fight. And it's also, emotions are very much in our bodies. So basically that brain has got its feelers down into our bodies. And it's also the brain that is in charge of a lot of these unconscious functionalities, like making our heart beat and our hair grow, etc., etc. So why are we talking about that? Because obviously when we are in a conversation with another person, there is a blue brain with another blue brain talking, and then there's a red brain to another red brain talking. And they influence each other. And also our blue brain and red brain are in conversation all the time too, and they influence each other as well. Now, in our world, we spend a lot of time training blue brain in our schools, our thinking, linear thinking, logic, etc. All blue brain. Language skills, blue brain. And we spend almost no time developing red brain skills, which is where emotional intelligence really sits. So when you look at it, when you put people into a conversation, and when you look at interpersonal effectiveness, 3/4 of our interpersonal effectiveness is driven by red brain to red brain. And yet we spend almost no time at all developing it. So imagine just if you spend a little bit of time developing your red brain, what can be possible in terms of the results that you can achieve in conversation with other people and in teams. That's what we're going to talk about. Now, the good news is with emotional intelligence, which emotional resilience is really part of that, is all of those skills can be learned. But when you're developing them, you have to do it the right way. You have to actually address the red brain rather than the blue brain. The way we very often try to do it is with lectures and from reading, etc. Those things are all interesting, but they don't necessarily translate to more skills. Actually, very often, it's not just neutral to try to do it in a cognitive way. Your emotional intelligence actually will decrease, or your performance will decrease if you try to do it cognitively. It's a little bit like trying to learn to ride a bike by just reading about the physics of bike riding and the engineering of bike riding, etc. And then you're up there on a bike trying to make it work, and then you overthink it. The whole point is to really experience balance. And once you experience that sense of balance, you really never lose it. So any kind of emotional intelligence skills really are like that. So how do we develop it? We have to do it experientially, which means we need to practice. There are a certain number of reps that you have to do. To get into an environment where there's feedback, where you can see your results as well as people tell you how you're coming across, etc. And you need to be motivated. So if you're trying to get people to develop their emotional intelligence and they're not motivated to do so, it's not going to work. So that's really important. So at EQED, we create these EQ learning labs, basically experiential learning labs, where people can practice those skills, get feedback, and become better in those things. And that's what we're going to do today. So when I said that this is going to be less of a lecture and more of an experience, that is the reason why. So going back for a moment to the saber-toothed tiger and red brain. So the saber-toothed tiger is there, and we notice the saber-toothed tiger, and then there is an entire cascade of physiological changes that go through the body. A lot of them we are familiar with. So, your adrenaline starts pumping, you might get a little bit more sweaty. Actually, blood drains from your brain into your limbs so that basically you can fight and that you can flee. So they go into your legs so that you can run away, into your fists so that you can actually fight. And a whole other bunch of other things happen, which are great when you are in a situation where you're facing a real physical danger out in the world. The problem is that the very same mechanism gets also triggered in conversation. And why is that? Because we don't have anything else. So basically, the body will perceive some kind of risky situation in a conversation as a conversation goes from a normal conversation to a high-risk conversation. And that will trigger that entire cascade of physiological changes in your body as if you were actually in physical or life and death kind of danger in your life, even though all you're doing is really just having a conversation. And that's very important to know, because when I really learned how that mechanism works, there was a humility that came up for me, both in terms of myself being a little bit more gentle with myself when I would enter these conversations and they wouldn't go as well as I had hoped, as well as having a bit more empathy and a bit more space for other people's reactions. Because the amazing thing about these high-risk conversations, it's rarely just us being triggered ourselves. It's also the other person normally is in that state, and we all know what can happen when that happens. So now that we know how some of this mechanism happens, and there's another factor to it. As I said, that like the blood actually drains from your brain and goes into your limbs. Red brain actually has the power to shut down blue brain when the danger is big enough. And so we've all had that situation in our lives where we basically are in a conversation and it gets risky, and not only are we experiencing all these emotions, we suddenly start having trouble tracking the conversation, which basically means like blue brain is shutting down. We're not able to really express ourselves. Well, remember, blue brain has words, red brain does not. And also we go kind of sometimes into attack mode where we end up saying things that we really don't want to say, or we regret afterwards, or we start withdrawing from the conversation, which is very much like a flight kind of reaction. All of that is completely normal because that's the machinery. And yet the skill is to both be aware of what's going on and then be able to regulate and soothe that. And we're going to be practicing that today. So I promised you an experience, and I think we're at the point where we can do that. So today we're going to be looking at self-awareness and self-regulation, and specifically we're going to be staying with ourselves. So we're not going to be speaking so much about tools and techniques about how to influence conversations and how to manage the conversation with the other person, but really it's all about managing ourselves today. So with that, if wherever you're sitting, if you just place yourself firmly on your chair and put your feet on the ground, and if you're holding something in your hands, just put that aside for a moment. And I realize some of you might actually be sitting at lunch at your workplaces, and you may not be able to close your eyes. So you can do this process open-eyed or closed-eyed. If you can close your eyes, it will be easier the first time, so I invite you to close your eyes if you can. But if you can't, it's perfectly fine. All right, so and as we go through this process, we're actually going to be developing some of those self-regulation tools, and I'll talk you through that. And then once we've gone through that process, we will debrief, and I will speak a little bit more about how to apply some of those things. All right, okay, so having your feet firmly on the ground, and if you can, if it's safe to do so, just please close your eyes. And then basically we're going to just start with 3 deep breaths. Very simply. So just take a deep breath in, and then breathing out, and then another deep breath in, and breathing out. And then the next deep breath, we're going to take a breath all the way down into our hips, into our legs, into our feet, and all the way into the earth. And the reason I'm sure you've heard many different kind of techniques which start with 3 deep breaths. A lot of mindfulness uses it. It only takes 3 deep breaths to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that part that actually gets us out of survival and gets us more grounded and more calm. And so if we're in a high-risk conversation and we start losing track a little bit, or we start getting triggered, actually just 3 deep breaths will actually allow cognition to come back up, calm us, etc. So that's why we're doing it today. So just taking another deep breath in, all the way down into your hips, into your legs, into your feet, and all the way into the floor. And as you continue to breathe that way, just find yourself kind of going deeper and wider into your hips. Like almost like a tripod, so that you can really, really feel that deep anchor down there. And the reason why we're doing that is when you anchor that way, most of our emotions, well, all of our emotions are in our bodies, and most of the negative ones actually happen above your hips upwards. So basically by having that deep and wide center underneath that, you're actually able to kind of cradle and ground yourself around it, so you can hold some of those sensations and feelings that come up in high-risk conversations. So that's a very important skill, actually, to be able to, when you get triggered, to be able to ground back. In many modalities, we're taught to breathe into our belly, but actually, in my experience around around emotional resilience, it's more powerful to do it into your hips. So again, take a deep breath down, all the way down into your hips, into your legs, into your feet, and then to the earth. Finding yourself going deeper and wider, and really strongly anchoring down in your hips in that way, in that deeper, wider center. And then we said we would have an experience, and obviously we are not partnered up with somebody, so we can't do it that way, but we can relive a particular conversation that was more high risk, and it actually will do a similar thing to our brains. So just I invite you to bring up a memory of a conversation that was high risk in some way. It could be at the workplace, it could be in your private life, it could be with a colleague, your boss, your spouse, your children, your parents, whatever comes up, and just know whatever that memory is just the perfect one. And it could have just happened recently, or it could be an older one. It's whatever comes up, just embrace that one. And just imagine a big screen in front of you. And just put that memory up on that screen and allow it to play. Just in its kind of broad brush strokes rather than all the details. So whenever you're ready, put up the memory and just allow it to play out. And then when it's done, just allow the screen to go blank again. And I'll give you a few seconds to do so. Beautiful. So as you now sit there, just that you have that blank screen, just take your attention inwards and start scanning your body. Just identify that area where that memory somehow hit you. One area that somehow started to get noisy, maybe it crunched up and contracted, maybe the temperature changed, maybe you just got hotter in that area, a little bit colder. An area that just somehow started to get activated as you were watching that memory. And just take your attention there, your awareness there. And then take a deep breath into that area. And then just ask yourself, if there was an emotion, a feeling associated with that area, what would it be? And just allow that to arise. It might be frustration. It might be anger. It might be fear, a sense of anxiety. It might even be hurt. Maybe a sense of betrayal or helplessness. Almost a sense of resignation because we've been there so many times and yet there it is, that situation again. Whatever it is for you, just allow that feeling to arise from that area. Beautiful. And then just put your hand on that area, wherever it is. It might be in your chest, it might be in your belly, it might be in your throat. If there are two areas, just work with the one that's the lowest, closest to your hips. And just with a sense of curiosity again, just check in with that area. And ask it, if that part had a particular age, what would it be? Often those areas are a little bit on the younger side, like 5 to 7, sometimes very young, even like 2 or 3. Sometimes more in teenage years, and once in a while there's also something that happens later, but most of the time it's kind of the younger ages. So whatever it is, just allow it to arise. And then, when you're ready, just shift around a little bit in your chair. Just change your position a teeny bit. And then just think to yourself, what is the best thing about your current age? What do you love about being the age that you're at right now? It could be that you have the freedom to pursue what you want to pursue. It could be that you have an ability to influence those around you, at work or at home. It could be that you really enjoy being a parent, let's say, or that you can travel and experience things that are of interest to you and you can follow your interests. Whatever it is for you, just get in touch with that for a moment and really anchor into that, what it means to be an adult, what it means to be your current age. And then think about the time or the situations where you feel you're most powerful. When you feel like you're really in flow and whatever you're doing just kind of comes to you, and you almost have that experience of you're built for this. I know for me is when I'm working with groups and when I'm facilitating and when we are working with some team dynamics and so on, it just, the experience is like every part of me is kind of being drawn on, and I come in and I experience a lot of power when I'm in that situation. Whatever it is for you, again, it could be at work, it could be in your private life, it could be when you're pursuing a hobby or something like that. Whatever it is for you and whatever situation comes up for you, just know that that's the perfect one. So again, being anchored into that present day adult self, and that self, that powerful self, that wise self, that is really competent in this particular way. And again, taking a deep breath all the way down into your hips, into your legs, into your feet, and all the way into the earth, going deeper and wider and anchoring into that adult self, that powerful self. From there, turn to that younger self that's in your body. And just check in with him or her. And just get a sense for what he or she is feeling. And then if you can do this aloud, say the words aloud, but you don't need to do that aloud. You can do it internally as well. But for practice reasons, it can be good to do it aloud. Just validate to that younger self what you can see they're feeling. You can say something like, I can really see that you're upset, that you feel frustrated, because we're going in circles here and there's no movement forward. You might say, goodness, I can really see that you're scared because the other person is shouting at you. It makes so much sense that you would be hurt, given how this conversation is going. Whatever it is for you, just take a moment and just validate what that younger self is feeling. Beautiful. And then again, just take a moment to just sense into that younger self. What might she or he need right now? And it doesn't mean that you give them anything else. The whole point is just to validate, to mirror the experience that they're having. So it might be that I can see that really how this conversation is going, you would really need a break right now to calm yourself a little. Or it could be, goodness, it makes so much sense that you really don't like it when people are speaking with raised voices and you really need them to calm down a little before we continue this conversation. It might be that they just need to know that they're loved and that they're safe. Maybe they just need a hug. Whatever it is, the point is not to give it to them, the point is just to validate and to mirror it, to just communicate to them that you're hearing them. And so just go ahead and validate and mirror to them what they need. Beautiful. And then just surround them with your own love, with their own care. Just surround that younger part in that way, the way you would surround a child. Just send them your love. And if they need a hug, you can give them a hug. And if they don't want one, that's perfectly okay as well. So then just hold them in high regard. And then just take another deep breath all the way down into your hips, into your legs, into your feet, and into the earth. And when you're ready, you can come back to the room and open your eyes. Beautiful. Nice work. Now, clearly, this is one of the limitations of this webinar, because if we were working in person with each other, we would be now speaking about it and sharing with each other what the experience is. And yet I do want to take a moment and just take us through why did we do what we did and what are the actual tools and the skills that you can then take to one of your conversations. So let's start with that. So we actually went through a number of self-regulation tools that you can use at any point during a conversation and then after a conversation. And actually we went through 4. So let's start with the first one. The first one was a very simple one, which is really take 3 deep breaths. And why we did that, just as a reminder, is to take you out of that fight and flight and activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which will also bring back some of your cognitive capacities and calm you, ground you more, and allow you to have access to some of those more competent, like your competence really, and some of your higher capacities. The other thing is that we didn't talk about is actually we are social animals, so we are actually wired to connect and we attune to each other all the time, and we emotionally affect each other all the time. So what research has shown, if you do this in a meeting or in a conversation and you take those 3 breaths and nobody ever has to know about this, it will actually calm the room and calm other people down too. So it's both a self-regulation as well as a co-regulation tool. So the take 3 deep breaths is our first one, which we did. The second one was the anchoring into your hips, which will help you ground. We often talk about staying grounded in conversations. Again, the reason why we do that is to continue to have access to our cognitive abilities and capacities. And the point was, and I know I kept saying it the same thing, but I was, as we talked about, like practicing and doing a number of reps are really, really important in order to train red brain, is this idea of going deeper and wider, like a tripod, all the way down into your hips, which will allow you to cradle all these emotions, especially the negative emotions that happen above that. So another one really important skill. I know for myself, I've done this now so many times that I can just hear myself when I'm in a conversation that gets a little bit iffy. I can just go anchor into my hips and then it just happens. And I know for myself, the conversations go much better. So again, it's a question of practicing that. The third one was the naming of the feeling in the body. You know how we played out the scene and then we tuned into ourselves and looked for that area that somehow felt different and then named it the feeling. That's an incredibly powerful self-regulation tool. There's a reason why speakers, for example, often go, oh goodness, I'm getting so nervous and I feel a little bit nervous, so let's jump right in. Because actually just by naming the feeling, it actually calms us down. So because again, naming is a cognitive facility. So, and the feelings are in the body. So you scan your body and then you allow that name to arise and that will actually calm you down. And then the fourth one is this idea of the dialogue with the younger self that we were doing. Why is this important? Because actually, when you look at some of those conversations, the difficult conversations, we might be thinking that we are having a conversation in the present time, but it's not just us, the adult self, having a conversation in present time with another person. It's actually all the other parts of us, because we really are not just one self. We have many different selves. And often some of these younger parts will come in that for whatever reason had a situation at some point where things didn't quite go the way that I had hoped. And they navigated a conversation with the capacities that they had at the time, which could be the capacities of an 8-year-old, which are not quite the same as the capacities of an adult. And then things didn't go quite so well, and they never got what they needed. And it's almost like a split happens, and then those younger selves end up being in our bodies and continue on. And when we are in a situation again that looks similar to red brain, because remember, it's very fast, but it's not as exact, these younger selves come in again, and sometimes they take over the conversation. So often, in those most important conversations, it's actually 2 8-year-olds having the conversation. So the skill is to anchor into our adult self and ground ourselves in there, and then take care of that younger self. And when I say that this will build resilience over time is, as you're getting to know your younger selves, you'll actually realize in these difficult conversations, in these high-risk conversations, it's only a handful of younger selves that keep showing up. And over time, as you're validating them, they start to build a certain amount of trust with you so that they don't come in so often. And they will get triggered, and then you will attend to them. And I often, my experience often is that it's almost like they sit on my lap and I have my hand around them while I'm continuing the conversation. And over time, you basically build resilience. You don't get triggered as much anymore, and you're able to handle it from that more capable adult self. So that's what we were practicing today. And this can be done during the conversation or after the conversation. I often attend to them just to a point of like, okay, do you have enough now? And for them to calm down. And if they don't calm down, that to me is a signal that I need to do more work and maybe take a break from the conversation. Sometimes go to the bathroom to get a break, because you can't always have a break from a conversation. Or something like that, because I'm not quite managing those parts of me. But as you practice that happens less and less and less. And we are able to bring those better selves of us to our conversation more often. So here we are. So take a deep breath, anchor into your hips, name the feeling in your body, and dialogue with the younger self. Those are our 4 tools that we learned today. So what does that mean? So for our, and I'm just checking the time. So for our going forward, really the next steps. There are 3 next steps I would invite you to. The first one is to continue to practice this, what we did today. Like, try to do a process once a day for the next 7 days and see what you learn, and you might even, spend 2 or 3 minutes journaling about that. That will increase your resilience. The second thing is, I would love to share some tools around emotional resilience and emotional intelligence with you. So if you go to your phone and just open the messaging app and just type in where the number goes, 44222, so that's 44222, and just in the message body write in resilience. That will give me your details, and then I can share some of those tools with you. And then finally, I am really excited to announce, I'm going to just go to the next slide so you can see that, is Pierre and I are actually going to do a workshop together in San Francisco on August the 15th, and I hope many of you can come and join us for that. And it's really going to be those 2 fields coming together, mindfulness at work, which is Pierre's area, and then emotional intelligence at work. And we're going to marry them together and really have you walk away with some very powerful tools in both of those areas, because they actually in some ways overlap in a lot of areas, and then they also have some areas where they don't overlap. So we're going to be really exploring that range between them, and it's going to go from 8:30 to 4:30. I know Melissa is going to be sharing the link on the chat with you, and also you can just go into Eventbrite and just Google, like basically just search for my name, and that's Lela, and that workshop will come up. So please practice for the next week every day for 7 days. You have down there, right at the bottom of the slide, you can see the text message link so that you can get some extra information, and also the workshop is coming up. So with that, Melissa, thank you so much for your attention, and I will turn it over to Melissa. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lela. I'm going to transition back to my slides here, and then we'll get into the Q&A. Some of you have already been asking questions. That's wonderful. If you haven't just yet, please go ahead and ask your questions as well, and we'll get to those in just a moment. If you have to leave, I know we're very close to time. That's perfectly all right. We will be sending a copy of the recording to you with the full Q&A sometime tomorrow. So do be on the lookout for that in your email so you won't miss anything. And thank you so much for staying a little bit over for the Q&A. We greatly appreciate it. So I did send you the link to the upcoming workshop in San Francisco, the Eventbrite link. You do have that. And then that phone code again was 44222. And that's also in the chat for you there. And so now we'll just get into the Q&A, and there's already some great questions coming in. Yeah, so Lela, in terms of developing more EQ, you went over some amazing tools today. One of the participants had a question about cognitive behavioral therapy and maybe some of the techniques that you've even shared are a little bit of that field. But they wanted to know, what do you think of using cognitive behavioral therapy to develop EQ?
That's a beautiful question. Thank you for that question. I think it can be very powerful. And at the same time, for me, it only addresses parts of it. So when you think about emotional intelligence, it's really, there are many definitions of it, but the way I think about it, there's an intrapersonal part of it, that's the inside of ourselves, which we were talking about today, self-awareness and self-regulation fall under that. And then there is the interpersonal piece, where it's actually between people, between two people, between you and a group of people. So as far as the cognitive behavioral therapy is concerned, I think it can be incredibly powerful in the intrapersonal side and can reach into the interpersonal side. But to really build the interpersonal side, which is the point of emotional intelligence, it is about developing those skills to be able to get things done with and through other people in a work context. In a more personal context, it's about relationships, really. I think the quickest way often is actually to get yourself into situations, into labs where you can actually practice it with other people. And the breakthroughs can be much faster, in my experience, in those areas. So it's a little bit of bringing both of those things. Like there's an intrapersonal part that you have to work on, and then there's the interpersonal piece. And you need both.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lela, and thank you for the question. And another participant asked, during the actual difficult conversation, do we do things like naming the feeling aloud, or is this just really going on all in our heads? What's the best way to really, be present and be using these techniques, but not necessarily, expressing them aloud, or do you encourage people to do that, to express them aloud?
So I think it depends very much on the context. So like again in EQ, you always have three things that you have to think about: the self, the other, and then the context that you're meeting under. So let's say in a work environment, often it would be inappropriate to express some of those feelings. And sometimes it could be very powerful to actually say that you're getting really frustrated about something, or that you're getting scared that actually the way the team is going right now and the way we're having this conversation, that we might not come to the outcome that we want to go to. That might be really appropriate. Talking about that you're starting to feel betrayed might not be such a great thing to share in that context. In a personal context, it could be different. If you're talking to your spouse or your children or your parents or your friends, you might be a little bit more open with sharing some of that. But the point and the most important part about this is to really become aware of them. And then you have choice. So once you are aware, then you have choice to go, okay, in order to influence this conversation and to move our conversation towards the results that we both of us want, is it appropriate to share or not? And there's some experimentation around that too, depending on, like as you experiment in more safe environments, you will get a sense for that. But the most important thing is to start becoming aware, because so often we are having all this stuff going on inside of us and we're not even aware of it, let alone know what we can do with it.
Right. So true. Great. And another question here, and I think you went over this a bit, but it might require a little bit more clarification. Can you explain a bit more how feelings are in our body and not our heads? And then the participant asks or says, many of us need help getting out of our heads, so I assume it's all linked. Can you explain that a bit more?
Yes. Well, we often, when we go, what are we feeling? You will often go, people start like looking in their brains, and often they will look up to kind of figure out where the feeling is. And actually, feelings are generated through our emotional brains. And the way the emotional brains, it's the body brain, really. That's another way to pull it. Like instead of red brain, it's the body brain. But those are actually sensations and chemical reactions that happen in our body somewhere in our physicality. So the quickest way that I know to identify that feeling is to really scan the body and identify an area that somehow is a different sensation, feels different, is somehow off, and then ask, what is the feeling? And then the feeling arises. That is also the one that connects us often to those younger selves that are also somehow stored in the body. So that's how yeah, is the quickest way to do so.
Wonderful, thank you. And then this will be our last question here. A participant asks, I find that during conversations, I've personally become very concerned I'm not being understood, which causes me stress and is triggering, as well as making for poor communication. Any tips for letting go of that?
Well, I think the first step always towards letting go is acknowledging what's actually going on. So my guess is, and obviously I don't know if this resonates for you and it's something to check out with yourself, is really to see and check in with yourself and see where in your body is that happening. And my guess is it's a younger self that has had that experience that starts coming into the conversation. And then the tool is basically to start validating that younger self. And actually, at least there's one person that is actually hearing her, understanding her, and that's you. So once you can calm her down or him down a little bit, then it's a question of, okay, all right, so now that I'm experiencing this, what is actually true? Is it that I'm not communicating? Is it that people are ignoring me? Is it that I could be saying things differently, etc.? But that's the next step. The first step is always like to soothe that younger self that comes in. And that's the first step towards letting go of that. And you know what? There might be some truth in it. And then if there is truth, and if it's not just all imagined, then you can attend to that. But if there is all just emotional noisiness, you really don't get to ever looking at, what else, that part that maybe needs to be changed. And I'm not saying that there is, but then you can be curious once you can take care of that younger self.
That's great. Thank you so much, Lela. Thank you so much for your insights, and thank you all for your great questions today. I have just one reminder, and I just sent you the link again for the workshop that Pierre and Lela will be doing in San Francisco. There's a $99 special. It's going to go up to $3.99 as the regular fee. So do take advantage of that today. That's going to be ending today. So click the handy link and go ahead and get yourself going for the next level of EQ. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end our session. Thank you all again for joining us. We will be sending you a copy of the recording tomorrow and some follow-up notes. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to having you at a future event. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lela. Bye-bye.
Bye.